The dark void of space swallowed Earth's final defenses. Ships, once brimming with pride and power, now limped in the shadow of an insurmountable enemy. President Aria Kane stood alone in the underground command center beneath Earth's surface, her eyes scanning the holographic battlefield projected in front of her. The Galactic Syndicate, an alliance of ruthless alien warlords, had nearly destroyed every significant resistance in the galaxy, and now they had turned their sights on Earth. The Syndicate's fleets were vast, their forces unrelenting. Aria's heart was heavy with the weight of the galaxy's fate, but she refused to break under the pressure. "Madam President," came the voice of General Tarkus, one of her most trusted officers. His tone was grave. "The Syndicate is moments away from entering Earth's orbit. The last of our defenses are failing. We've lost contact with our outer colonies." Aria didn't flinch, her face set in a determined mask. "Then it's time to make our last stand." She turned from the hologram, her gaze locking with Tarkus's. "Activate the Aegis Protocol. I don't care if it's untested. We have one shot at this." The Aegis Protocol was Earth's trump card, a weapon of unimaginable power, an energy cannon capable of vaporizing an entire fleet in one strike. But it had never been fired in combat before. The prototype had been designed in secret, with cutting-edge technology from humanity's best scientists. There were risks, of course, risks Aria was fully aware of. A single misfire could obliterate the planet, but in the face of annihilation, it was their only option. Tarkus hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Aegis Protocol ready for activation. He turned to his console, his fingers flying over the keys. The room hummed with tension. The last few minutes felt like hours as Aria watched the countdown to the final confrontation. Deep down, she knew this could be Earth's last moment of existence, but she would not back down. Her people had fought too long and too hard for this moment. Her hand clenched at her side as she spoke, her voice steady but laced with an edge of quiet fury. "We will fight. We will never surrender." She paused, her mind flashing to the millions of soldiers, citizens, and allies who had fallen over the course of this endless war. "We are humanity, and we are not broken." The control room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. 5 minutes to enemy entry, a technician reported. Aria gave a sharp nod. "Begin final preparations. The Aegis is our only hope. We will hold this line, no matter what." Her fingers hovered over the command console, her mind racing through every possibility. What if the weapon malfunctioned? What if it didn't work? What if this was the end, and she was simply the final chapter in humanity's tragic story? She shook off the thoughts. Fear would not dictate her actions. She had a job to do, and she would do it until the very end. The clock ticked down, the final moments of Earth's existence narrowing to a sliver. Aria's breath caught in her chest as she looked out at the vast expanse of space from the reinforced command center's viewing port. The Syndicate's fleet, like a swarm of locusts, was closing in on them with terrifying speed. As the battle loomed closer, she knew that this would be the ultimate test of her leadership. Her hand fell firmly on the activation button. "This is the last command," she said quietly, but loud enough for her team to hear. "We fight to the end." With those words, the energy cannon hummed to life, its terrifying power building, ready to unleash the fury of humanity's final stand. The countdown hit 0. The moment the Aegis Protocol fired, it felt as though time itself had stopped. The immense energy beam shot from Earth's surface into space, carving through the void like a force of nature. A massive explosion of light filled the blackness as the Syndicate's flagship, the Tyraxis, was engulfed in the blast. It was a fleeting hope, Earth's greatest weapon, unleashed in the final moments of desperation. But as the light faded and the aftermath settled, Aria's heart sank. The Tyraxis remained intact. The weapon's power, though devastating, had failed to breach the Syndicate's massive shields. The flagship had taken damage, but the Syndicate's fleet was far from crippled. Failure, General Tarkus muttered under his breath, his face pale as he stared at the damage reports flooding the control panels. We've lost our last shot. Aria's mind raced as she processed the situation. The Aegis was supposed to be their salvation, and yet it had not even scratched the surface of the enemy's might. She gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white with tension. The battle was not over, but it might as well have been. "We're not done yet," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. She wasn't about to let Earth fall without a fight. "All units, fall back to base. Full retreat, now." The orders were cold and direct, but there was something more beneath her words, an unspoken promise to the people of Earth that she wouldn't give up. Despite the failure, despite the overwhelming odds, she would keep fighting. But as her commanders began to relay the retreat orders, Aria felt a familiar weight settle in her chest. The reality of her position was undeniable. Earth had been battered by years of war, and this was the final push. The people, though resilient, were beginning to lose hope. She had seen it in their eyes, the fear, the doubt. The Syndicate's overwhelming might was too much to ignore. Yet something in Aria refused to accept that they were beaten. "General Tarkus," she said, eyes narrowing with resolve, "prepare a secondary plan. I want every remaining ship and soldier to launch a guerrilla offensive. We will not go down quietly. Gather every fighter, every piece of tech we have left. We're going to infiltrate their command and strike at the heart of their operation." Tarkus, ever the tactician, raised an eyebrow. "Madam President, with respect, our forces are in no condition to mount a direct offensive against the Syndicate. They're stronger, more advanced and they're overconfident," Aria interrupted. "That's their weakness. They've underestimated us from the start. If we can disrupt their command structure, cripple their leadership, we might just stand a chance." She paused, thinking of the many who had fallen in the war, and the few who remained. The weight of their sacrifice rested heavily on her shoulders. Aria had lost many in the struggle, but she could not let their deaths be in vain. She turned to her communications officer. "Patch me into the fleet commanders. I need them all." The officer nodded, his hands quickly working over the terminal. Within seconds, the faces of her remaining commanders flickered onto the screen. The battered fleet of ships, survivors of countless battles, were all that stood between Earth's future and complete destruction. "We're going to hit them where it hurts," Aria declared, her voice resolute. "We infiltrate their flagship, the Tyraxis. The Syndicate's power lies in their command. If we can break their leadership, we'll sow chaos in their ranks. We fight with everything we have left. There is no retreat." The commanders exchanged glances, uncertainty mixed with a renewed fire in their eyes. Some hesitated. Too many had already died for this cause, but others nodded firmly, their faces hardening with the resolve they had not known they still had. "We'll fight," said Captain Jensen, the commander of Earth's elite special forces. "Together." Aria smiled grimly, feeling the strength of their resolve. "Then let's make them regret underestimating humanity." As the fleet began to rally for a daring assault on the Syndicate flagship, Aria's mind raced. The risks were enormous. The Syndicate's fleet was vast, its forces ruthless. But there was one thing the aliens had never counted on: humanity's unwavering spirit. Aria could sense it now, deep in her bones, the spark of rebellion that would not die, no matter how dark the hour. The battle had only just begun, and she would lead them to the very end. As Earth's remaining forces began their desperate preparations for the counterattack, President Aria Kane stood on the command bridge of the Vigilance, the last operational battleship in Earth's fleet. The hum of machinery and the sound of commands being issued filled the air, but her mind was elsewhere, focused on the task ahead. The Tyraxis loomed large in the distance, a colossal warship that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. If they were going to infiltrate it, every second would count. "All units report ready, Madam President," General Tarkis's voice crackled through her earpiece, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the air. "We've gathered what's left of our forces, but I have to be honest, our chances are slim. We're talking about infiltrating the most fortified ship in the Syndicate fleet, with barely enough fighters to cover us." "I know the odds," Arya replied, her voice steady but intense. "But I also know that the Syndicate's leadership is their greatest vulnerability. If we strike hard and fast, we can shatter their morale. This is our chance. If we don't take it, Earth falls." Tarkis fell silent, and she could almost hear his mind working through the impossible odds. Finally, he spoke, determination rising in his tone. "Then we'll take that chance, for Earth." "Good," Arya said, turning to the holographic display in front of her. The plan was simple but risky. Use the last of their fighters to create a diversion and breach the Tyraxis while the remaining ships provided cover. A handful of elite soldiers, including Arya herself, would infiltrate the flagship's heart, taking down the Syndicate's leadership. The rest of Earth's remaining forces would do whatever they could to hold off the rest of the enemy fleet long enough for the mission to succeed. The Vigilance shuddered as it moved into position, weapon systems ready for the coming chaos. Arya's gaze hardened as she surveyed her remaining commanders, now assembled around her. Every one of them was prepared to lay down their life for the cause. There was no going back. "All fighters, launch!" Arya's voice rang out, and the room exploded into action. Outside, hundreds of ships detached from the Vigilance, their engines flaring as they made their way toward the enemy flagship. The once proud fleet of Earth's defenders now moved as one, an unyielding mass of resistance hurtling toward the greatest challenge they had ever faced. The first waves of fighters engaged the Syndicate's outer defenses, weaving through incoming fire and launching missiles in a synchronized assault. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as Earth's remaining pilots fought with all the fury and desperation they had. The sky, once dark and cold, now roared with the fury of battle. But Arya's focus remained on the Tyraxis. Their window of opportunity was narrow, and she could already see the Syndicate fleet adjusting to counter their assault. The massive flagship fired back with terrifying precision, its energy shields repelling incoming blasts. The enemy commanders were regrouping. "We're not going to make it unless we act now," Tarkis said through the comms, his voice strained. "The Tyraxis is repositioning its forces. We'll have to break through their line." Arya clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. "Keep the pressure on them. We've got one shot. No retreat." She turned to her elite soldiers, those who would infiltrate the Tyraxis and take out its leadership. They were the best humanity had to offer, each one trained for situations like this. They moved swiftly, silently, ready to face the impossible. "We'll cut through their defenses, breach their core, and neutralize their command," Arya ordered, her voice unwavering. "No matter what it takes." The plan had been set in motion. The remaining ships would hold off the enemy fleet, while Arya and her team would infiltrate the heart of the Tyraxis. As the fighters continued to engage the Syndicate's forces, the Vigilance would stay in position to provide cover. The fate of Earth depended on this daring assault. Minutes felt like hours as Arya and her team boarded the shuttle that would carry them toward the enemy flagship. The shuttle doors closed with a finality that echoed in her chest. She exchanged a look with General Tarkis, the weight of their mission heavy on both of them. There was no going back now. As the shuttle broke free from the Vigilance and shot toward the Tyraxis, Arya's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, Earth's final chance to strike back. They would either succeed in toppling the Syndicate's leadership, or they would fall, leaving the fate of humanity sealed in the ashes of space. And yet, despite everything, despite the odds, there was no fear in Arya's heart, only the fire of defiance. The Tyraxis awaited them. The shuttle tore through space, dodging incoming enemy fire as it neared the towering Tyraxis. Arya's hands gripped the seat straps, her mind focused entirely on the mission ahead. The quiet hum of the shuttle's engines was the only sound as the black void of space stretched endlessly around them. "We've got 30 seconds until we breach their outer defenses." Captain Jensen's voice came through the comms, his tone tense but controlled. "Once we're in range, we'll drop the cloak and go in full throttle." Arya nodded, her eyes scanning the dark silhouette of the Tyraxis, a fortress of steel and weaponry, its shape looming over them like a predator. The Syndicate's flagship had no equal, a ship capable of annihilating entire fleets in seconds. Its power was overwhelming, but Arya had a single burning purpose: she had to end this. "Prepare for entry," she said, her voice tight. "We get in, neutralize their command, and get out, no distractions." The shuttle's cloak flickered as it activated, becoming nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The tension in the cabin was palpable as they approached the Tyraxis. It was a silent moment, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see if humanity could pull off the impossible. "Engaging cloaking system now," Jensen said, his fingers dancing over the controls. The shuttle shuddered as the device activated, and they seemed to vanish from the Syndicate's sensors. The massive warship loomed closer, its dark hull lined with deadly turrets and powerful energy cannons. Arya's mind raced as she thought about their chances of success. The Tyraxis was a fortress in space, and even the smallest slip could mean their annihilation. But there was no choice now, only the path ahead. The shuttle lurched as they crossed into the outer perimeter of the flagship's defenses. Jensen's hand hovered over the controls, waiting for the signal to drop the cloak and initiate the final phase of their entry. "All systems green," one of the crew reported. "We're almost through." "Prepare for impact," Arya said, her voice cool. Suddenly, the cloak flickered and vanished. In that instant, the Tyraxis' weapons detected them, and a barrage of fire erupted from the flagship's turrets. The shuttle was rocked violently as energy blasts slammed into its shields. "Brace for impact," Jensen yelled, slamming his hand on the controls as the shuttle veered hard to the left. The massive hull of the Tyraxis was now fully visible before them, and they were heading straight for its outer docking bay. A brilliant explosion cracked through the darkness as a shot narrowly missed the shuttle, sending it spiraling out of control. The shuttle's shields held for a moment longer, but it was clear they couldn't take much more. "We're losing power," one of the crew shouted, panic creeping into their voice. "Steady," Arya barked, her eyes narrowing. "Drop us in that docking bay, now." Jensen's hands moved like lightning, his eyes focused entirely on the controls. With a final, desperate push, he slammed the shuttle into the massive docking bay, narrowly avoiding the deadly fire that chased them. The shuttle crashed hard against the cold metallic floor of the bay, the impact throwing the crew against their restraints. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the groan of the shuttle's damaged systems. Arya quickly regained her bearings, unstrapping herself from the seat and reaching for her sidearm. "Move, move, move," she shouted. The air was thick with the scent of burnt metal, and the sound of alarms echoed through the bay. The team scrambled to their feet, weapons drawn, prepared for the fight ahead. The doors of the shuttle hissed open, revealing the metallic labyrinth of the Tyraxis' interior. It was like stepping into the heart of a machine, dark, oppressive, and silent except for the faint hum of energy flowing through the ship's power grid. "We need to find the command center," Arya said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "And we need to do it fast. This place will be swarming with Syndicate forces." Captain Jensen nodded, leading the way as the team moved swiftly through the corridors, every shadow a potential enemy. They passed empty rooms and long, dark hallways, knowing that any moment could bring an ambush. The Syndicate was ruthless, and they would not hesitate to eliminate any threat. The Syndicate soldiers were trained for this, Arya knew that. But Earth soldiers were driven by something the Syndicate could never understand: survival. They fought not just for their lives, but for the lives of everyone who had ever called Earth home. and today that would make all the difference. As the patrol rounded the corner, Aria's hand instinctively reached for her sidearm, her pulse quickening. She could see the dark silhouettes of the soldiers in the dim hallway, their armor gleaming faintly under the harsh lights above. They were too close to avoid detection, but Aria wasn't about to back down. "On my mark," she whispered, her voice steady but edged with urgency. The team tightened their grips on their weapons, prepared to strike. "Mark," Aria said with a fierce determination. The ambush was swift. The first soldier never saw it coming. Aria and her team surged forward in a blur of motion, closing the distance between them and the patrol in seconds. Aria fired first, one shot, one kill, taking down the lead soldier before his weapon could even rise. The sound of the shot echoed in the corridor, and chaos erupted. The remaining Syndicate soldiers scrambled for cover, their own weapons drawn in an instant. But they were outmatched. Aria moved like a shadow, darting between the pillars of the corridor and dispatching the enemies with deadly precision. Her team mirrored her actions, cold, efficient, ruthless. Captain Jensen's voice cut through the firestorm, his orders sharp and commanding. "Take them down, fast. Move to the next sector." Within moments, the hallway was cleared, the last of the Syndicate soldiers crumpling to the floor. But Aria didn't allow herself a second to breathe. They were deep within the Tyraxis now, and time was running out. "We're close," Aria muttered, her eyes scanning the maze of corridors. The command center should be just ahead. They moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the ship's high-tech flooring. The air grew heavier as they approached the heart of the Tyraxis, a place where only the highest-ranking Syndicate officers were allowed to tread. This was where the true power of the Syndicate resided. As they reached the final corridor leading to the command center, Aria signaled her team to halt. There was a heavy silence now, a palpable tension that hung in the air. Aria's eyes narrowed as she studied the doors at the end of the hallway, massive, reinforced with layers of shielding and energy barriers. These were not just ordinary doors, they were designed to withstand direct hits from powerful weapons. But Aria wasn't here to take the easy route, she was here to end this. "Jensen, get the breaching charge ready," Aria said, her voice low but commanding. "On it," Jensen replied, already moving to place the charge at the base of the door. The team took cover as Jensen attached the charge, setting the timer. Seconds felt like hours as the high-pitched whine of the charge echoed through the corridor. Finally, with a deafening explosion, the doors buckled and blew outward in a massive burst of force, sending sparks flying and the air rippling with shockwaves. "Go, go, go!" Aria yelled, charging through the smoke and debris, her heart pounding in her chest. They burst into the command center, weapons raised, and immediately found themselves face to face with the Syndicate's top officers, 7 of them, all standing in a tight formation around a massive holographic display. They were unprepared, but not entirely defenseless. A few had weapons drawn, but Aria and her team were already moving before they could react. The officers froze, eyes widening as Aria stepped forward, her weapon leveled at the leader, a tall, imposing figure known only as General Varkas. His cold eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither spoke. "You," Varkas said, his voice low, almost a growl, "are out of your depth, human. Do you truly believe you can end this? The Syndicate is eternal." Aria's lip curled into a small smile, the fire in her eyes unyielding. Eternal? It was never eternal. It was just a matter of time before you slipped up, and that time is now. She raised her weapon and fired, a single shot. The explosion of energy sent General Varkas flying backward, crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. His body crumpled, lifeless before it hit the floor. The remaining officers hesitated, just long enough for Aria to signal her team to take action. A deadly dance of fire and blood ensued, each of Earth's elite soldiers moving like a blur, their precision and speed unmatched. The Syndicate officers fought back fiercely, but they were no match for the ferocity and resolve of Earth's soldiers. Aria moved through the chaos, her eyes locked on the central control panel at the heart of the command center. She had one goal now, to end the Syndicate's grip on the galaxy for good. With one last, decisive action, she slammed her fist onto the control panel, sending a surge of electrical feedback through the system. The ship's central command went into a momentary shutdown, the lights flickering as the emergency systems kicked in. It wasn't over yet, but it was a start. "Secure the control room," Aria said, breathing heavily but resolute. "We're taking this ship." The countdown had begun. The command center was a war zone, the air thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning metal. But despite the chaos, Aria stood at the heart of it, her focus sharp. The control panel before her hummed as the emergency systems continued to blink erratically. The Tyraxis was in disarray, its once imposing power now a flickering shadow of its former self. The Syndicate's hold on the flagship had been shattered, but the battle was far from over. "Command center secured, ma'am," Captain Jensen reported, his voice steady through the comms. "But we've got incoming reinforcements. We need to move fast." Aria glanced over at the rest of her team, their weapons still drawn, eyes alert. There was no time to celebrate their victory, no room for complacency. The enemy was far from defeated, and the real challenge had only just begun. "Patch into their systems," she ordered, her voice cool and authoritative. "We need access to the Tyraxis' full power grid and weapon systems." Jensen nodded, his fingers flying over the terminals. Within moments, the screen before Aria lit up with detailed schematics of the Tyraxis. The data was overwhelming, but she knew exactly what to look for. The ship was a fortress, with layers of security protocols designed to keep intruders out. But those protocols were nothing compared to the resolve of Earth's soldiers. "Got it," Jensen said, a note of triumph in his voice. "I've bypassed their firewalls. We have full control over their weapon systems and the ship's core. We're in." Aria allowed herself a small nod of approval. This was it. With control of the Tyraxis, they could not only cripple the Syndicate's operations in this sector, but they could strike at the heart of the entire organization. "Good work, Jensen," Aria said. "Now, prepare for the next phase. We need to clear this ship of Syndicate forces before they get organized." A sudden explosion shook the room, followed by a violent jolt that threw Aria off balance. The emergency alarms blared louder, and the lights flickered again. The Tyraxis was fighting back, its engines beginning to roar back to life, despite the damage they had inflicted. "The Syndicate's trying to regain control," Jensen shouted, his fingers moving frantically over the controls. "They're redirecting power to the ship's main guns. If they get those online again, we're sitting ducks." "Shut them down now," Aria barked. Jensen's hands worked in overdrive, accessing the ship's internal systems, overriding the commands as the power surge from the engines started to climb. It was a race against time, one that would determine whether they could keep control of the flagship or be obliterated by its weapons. "Almost there," Jensen muttered. "If they fire, we won't survive the impact." "Focus," Aria snapped. She scanned the room, looking for her next move. The Syndicate soldiers would be coming, and the command center wouldn't hold against a full assault. "Move out," she ordered. "We need to disable their main guns before they fire again. Let's go." The team moved quickly, each member covering their sector, eyes scanning for any sign of enemy movement. Aria led them through the labyrinth of the Tyraxis' hallways, adrenaline surging through her veins. As they approached the central weapons bay, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the metal corridors, a sign that the Syndicate was regrouping. The door to the weapons bay slid open with a hiss, and Aria's team stormed in. The room was massive, lined with racks of the ship's formidable energy cannons and missile launchers. But in the center of the room, there was a glowing control panel, the nerve center of the Tyraxis' weapon systems. Aria wasted no time. She sprinted toward the panel, her heart racing as she drew her sidearm. The air crackled with tension as a team of Syndicate soldiers emerged from the shadows, guns raised and ready to fight. "Clear them out," Arya shouted to her team. The battle erupted instantly, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing throughout the chamber. Arya fired, her shots precise and lethal. A Syndicate soldier fell, then another, as her team pushed forward with ruthless efficiency. Despite the overwhelming odds, they fought with a sense of purpose that the Syndicate could not match. Every member of Arya's team was a testament to Earth's unyielding resolve. No matter how many times they were knocked down, they got back up. "Clear," Jensen shouted, his voice strained but resolute. "We've got control of the weapon systems again." Arya approached the central console, her hands steady as she input the final override codes. With a final press of a button, the Tyraxis' weapon systems went dark. The ship's massive guns powered down, and a relieved silence filled the room. "We've done it," Arya said, her voice hard but filled with an undeniable sense of victory. "But this isn't over. We've still got to deal with the Syndicate's backup forces." Jensen glanced at the screen, his eyes widening. "Mom, we've got a problem. The Syndicate's sending a fleet. We need to get out of here, fast." Arya looked out across the weapons bay, the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but there was no hesitation in her eyes. They had the Tyraxis, and now they had the opportunity to strike at the heart of the Syndicate. They would either win today, or they would die trying. "Prepare for the final push," Arya commanded. "We take the fight to them. Now." The Tyraxis shuddered as its engines roared back to life, the ship's momentum surging through the vast expanse of space. Arya stood at the command center, her hands gripping the controls with a steady resolve. They had seized the ship, but now the real challenge began, fighting their way out of the Syndicate's grasp and making sure the flagship was never used against Earth again. "Incoming transmission," Jensen announced, his voice tight with tension. "It's from Syndicate Command. They want to negotiate." Arya shot him a sharp look, her eyes burning with determination. "Negotiate? With them?" Her voice was laced with disdain. "What makes them think I'd entertain such a thing?" "They're desperate, ma'am," Jensen said, his fingers flying across the console. "It's their last attempt to stop us. They're sending everything they've got." Arya didn't waste a second. "Answer them, but don't make it easy." Jensen nodded, and within moments, a holographic image of a Syndicate commander appeared in front of them. He was a middle-aged man, his face hard and worn, as though life in the Syndicate had taken its toll. His uniform was impeccable, the insignia of his rank gleaming on his chest. "Commander Arya," the man's voice echoed through the chamber, filled with forced calm. "I offer you one chance. Surrender the Tyraxis, and we will let you and your crew leave unharmed. You and I both know this rebellion is futile. The Syndicate will crush you, just as we've crushed others before." Arya's lips curled into a smile, cold and unforgiving. "You think we're afraid of your threats?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You're the ones who should be terrified. Earth doesn't surrender, and we don't negotiate with tyrants." The Syndicate commander's face darkened, and he opened his mouth to respond, but Arya didn't give him the chance. She slammed her fist down on the control panel, cutting the transmission. "No more games," she muttered. "This ends today." "We've got an enemy fleet closing in fast," Jensen reported, his voice tight with urgency. "At least 30 ships, cruisers, battleships, the works. They mean to overwhelm us." Arya stared at the holographic star map that flickered to life before her. The Syndicate's fleet was indeed massive, and they were closing in from all directions. But Arya knew something they didn't. The Tyraxis might be damaged, but it was still the most advanced warship in the galaxy. They had control of its systems now. They just needed to hold on long enough to make their strike. "Prepare the ship for battle," Arya ordered. "Activate the shields. We're not running. We're going to fight." The crew sprang into action, their movements swift and coordinated. Aria's mind raced as she considered their options. They had one chance to cripple the Syndicate's fleet and win this war once and for all. "Get me a direct link to the ship's weapon systems," she said to Jensen, her voice unwavering. "We need to turn the Tyraxes into a weapon the Syndicate will never forget." "Yes, ma'am," Jensen replied, already at work. The room buzzed with energy as the massive ship's weapons powered up, glowing blue as they prepared to unleash hell. Aria could feel the vibration beneath her feet as the ship's turrets locked onto their targets. The Tyraxes was a force of nature, and now it was Earth's weapon of vengeance. "Captain, deploy all drones and fighters," Aria continued, her voice cool but filled with purpose. "Give us cover while we break through their lines. The fleet will be the least of our worries once we get to their command ship." A wave of drones and starfighters shot out from the Tyraxes, swarming into the vacuum of space like a swarm of angry hornets. They began their assault immediately, firing on the Syndicate's frontline ships, giving the Tyraxes precious moments to position itself for the final strike. "Shields at full power," Jensen called out. "We're holding up against their fire, but it won't last forever." "Then we make it count," Aria replied, her hand gripping the controls tighter. "Focus all firepower on their lead battleship. If we take that down, we break their formation." The massive Tyraxes veered left, its thrusters pushing the ship into a sharp turn as it angled toward the heart of the Syndicate fleet. The first barrage hit its target, the lead battleship, shattering its shields and sending it into a rapid spin. The explosion that followed was spectacular, lighting up the darkness of space like a supernova. The shockwave tore through the Syndicate's formation, throwing their ships into disarray. But the battle was far from won. The enemy fleet was still formidable, and the Tyraxes had just drawn their full attention. "Full speed ahead," Aria commanded, her pulse steady. "We break through their line, no turning back." The ship's engines roared to life as the Tyraxes shot forward, a streak of fire in the cold expanse. Enemy ships tried to converge on them, but the Tyraxes was faster, its shields taking hit after hit while returning fire with devastating power. Aria's mind sharpened as she tracked the enemy fleet, each movement calculated, each attack precise. Earth had always been underestimated, always the underdog. But today, the Syndicate would learn what it meant to face the fury of humanity. The last battle was here, and Aria was going to win it. The Tyraxes surged forward, cutting through the chaos of the battlefield like a blade through soft flesh. Its weapons flared to life. Each shot a deadly burst of energy that tore apart Syndicate ships with surgical precision. The enemy fleet was in disarray, their once strong formations shattered by the relentless assault. But still they fought on, desperate to prevent Aria from completing her mission. "We're through their front lines," Jensen shouted, his voice full of excitement but tinged with urgency. "We've cleared a path to their command ship, ma'am." "Good," Aria replied, her eyes locked on the massive Syndicate flagship looming in the distance. "Now we finish it." The command ship, a colossal vessel bristling with weaponry and shields, was the heart of the Syndicate's fleet. If they could destroy it, the entire force would collapse. Aria's hand tightened on the controls, guiding the Tyraxes toward the enemy ship with relentless determination. "Target their main reactor," she ordered. "We take that out, and their fleet will follow." Jensen's fingers flew over the console, locking onto the Syndicate command ship's weak points. "Locked on," he confirmed. "Firing on your mark." Aria's breath caught as she watched the display before her. The Syndicate flagship loomed larger with every passing second, a symbol of everything humanity had fought against. She had been through countless battles, faced down insurmountable odds, but this was the moment that would define the future of Earth and its people. "Fire," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The Tyraxes unleashed a devastating barrage, a stream of energy that hit the Syndicate command ship with pinpoint accuracy. The first round tore into its shields, weakening them. The second round broke through, striking deep into the heart of the ship's reactor core. The explosion that followed was unlike anything Area had ever witnessed, an inferno of energy that consumed the command ship in an instant. A massive shockwave rippled through space, sending smaller Syndicate ships tumbling out of control, their hulls torn apart by the blast. The remnants of the command ship were nothing more than a burning wreck, the Syndicate's command structure reduced to ash. Aria's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the spectacle unfold, but there was no time for celebration. The Syndicate's remaining ships were in full retreat, but they still posed a threat. And Earth wasn't done yet. "Captain, they're scattering," Jensen said, his voice full of disbelief. "The fleet's breaking apart. We've won." Aria's gaze remained fixed on the shattered fleet, her mind calculating the next steps. Victory wasn't just about destroying their enemies, it was about ensuring Earth's future. The Syndicate had been a thorn in humanity's side for far too long, and now they would learn what it meant to challenge Earth's will. "Prepare to broadcast," Aria ordered, her voice as cold and commanding as ever. "We're sending a message." Jensen nodded, quickly working to establish a communication link. Within moments, Aria's image appeared on every screen within the remaining Syndicate ships, her face a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit. "This is Commander Aria of the Tyraxis," she began, her voice steady and resolute. "To the remnants of the Syndicate fleet, your reign ends today. You've underestimated Earth's resolve. We do not surrender, and we do not forget. The galaxy is no longer your playground." Her words echoed across the void, a declaration of humanity's triumph. "This is your final warning. Leave Earth's space, or we will hunt you down and eradicate every last trace of your corruption." As the message concluded, the remaining Syndicate ships hesitated. Some tried to make a break for it, while others simply powered down, their crews surrendering. Aria knew the war wasn't over yet. The Syndicate had deep roots, but today Earth had won. They had proven their strength, their resolve, and their unwillingness to bend. "Jensen, bring us back to Earth," Aria said, her voice softening for the first time in days. "It's over. We've earned our peace." The Tyraxis began its journey back, the stars ahead as silent witnesses to their victory. Aria stood at the helm, her thoughts turning inward as the weight of the battle slowly lifted from her shoulders. She had led them to victory. She had fought to the end, and now humanity had a future, one they would never again take for granted. "Earth stands," she whispered to herself, her heart swelling with pride, "and we will fight for it, always." As the ship's engines hummed and the stars stretched out before them, Aria knew that the galaxy would never forget the name of Earth. The Tyraxis had been their last command, and it had ensured humanity would never be silenced.